Strange thing about life. It never warns you before it flips the table. You go on thinking you've got it all figured out, that the days will keep crawling by the same way they always have. And then, out of nowhere, someone walks in. Not just anyone. Someone who tilts the ground beneath your feet. Someone who rearranges the rules you thought were carved in stone. You don't see them coming. You don't plan for it. And you sure as hell don't get to control it. But when they arrive, nothing stays the same. Change often arrives disguised as a person. You expect it to come in big explosions, in moments that shake the ground, in events that split your life into before and after. But life is smarter than that. It doesn't always send storms or disasters. Sometimes it just sends someone. An ordinary face, a casual voice, a presence that doesn't announce itself as destiny. And yet, beneath the surface, they are the earthquake you never prepared for. At first, they don't look like change. They look like another stranger, another encounter, another passing figure in the endless crowd. You might ignore them, brush them off, even underestimate their role in your life. That's the trick. Life disguises them so well that by the time you realize what they are, it's already too late. They've already shifted something inside you. A thought, a decision, a perspective you can't go back from. And it doesn't always feel like a gift. Sometimes the person who changes you breaks you first. They challenge the illusions you've built. Let's tear down the lies you've told yourself. They drag you into places you've avoided. Their presence doesn't always bring comfort. It brings friction. They irritate the comfortable parts of you. They disturb the routines you cling to. They force you to look in the mirror you've been avoiding. You don't always welcome them, but that doesn't matter. They weren't sent to be welcomed. They were sent to alter you. Other times, their impact is quiet. A sentence they speak lodges in your mind and refuses to leave. A small act they do opens your eyes to something you never considered. A look, a word, a moment. It doesn't take much. And that's the beauty of it. Change doesn't need grand gestures. It needs the right trigger, the right spark, delivered by the right person. The most dangerous part is that you never see it coming. You never wake up knowing, today I'll meet the one who will alter the trajectory of my life. No, it sneaks up on you. It hides in the mundane. You could be sitting in a coffee shop, walking down the street, scrolling through another meaningless day, and there they are, ordinary to everyone else, extraordinary only to you. And from that point on, your story bends. Decisions you thought you'd already made get rewritten. Paths you swore you'd never walk suddenly open. They pull threads you didn't know existed, and soon the entire fabric of your life starts to rearrange. You can resist it, fight it, deny it, but the shift is already in motion. Once someone becomes the catalyst, there's no undoing it. People love to think they're in control of their transformations, that they'll decide when to grow, when to change, when to become something new. But often, it isn't your choice. It's someone sent into your life to make sure you move when you refuse to. And sometimes that someone saves you, Sometimes they destroy you. Most of the time, they do both. Looking back, you'll see the pattern. The moments where life pivoted, the forks in the road, the decisions you never thought you'd make. All of them trace back to a person. A face. A presence that shifted you in a way nothing else could. They were the disguise change wore when it walked through your door. And whether you love them, hate them, or barely understand them, you'll never be able to deny what they were. Change often arrives disguised as a person. Not in thunder, not in lightning, not in earthquakes, in a hand extended, a word spoken, an eye that sees you differently than the rest. You never recognize it at the start, but in time you'll realize that was the moment everything began to move. The right person shifts your entire direction. You think you know where you're going. You draw maps in your head. You make promises to yourself about what the future will look like. But one encounter, one conversation, one presence in your life, and suddenly all those maps don't matter. That's what makes it so unsettling. You can spend years building walls around who you think you are, and one person walks in and knocks them down without even trying. They don't have to do something extraordinary. Sometimes it's not about what they give you, but what they pull out of you. A part of you that's been buried, ignored, silenced for years, suddenly comes alive in their presence. They have a way of making you feel like you've been walking in circles, and now the ground finally straightens out. And it's not that they hand you direction. It's that they awaken something inside you that was always there, waiting, but too weak to rise without a spark. The dangerous part is that it rarely feels comfortable. When the right person shifts your direction, it often feels like a collision. You don't glide into it gracefully. It's messy. You resist it. You fight against the pull because deep down you know what it means if you let them in. The life you've been clinging to will never be the same again. And that terrifies you more than staying stuck ever could. But that's the point. The right person doesn't come to reinforce your comfort zone. They come to smash it apart. They make you question the decisions you swore were final. They force you to reconsider the identity you've been hiding behind. They don't let you keep lying to yourself, because their very existence shines a light on the cracks you hoped no one would notice. Sometimes they appear as love, sometimes as a mentor, sometimes as a stranger who speaks one line that rewires your brain. It doesn't matter the form. What matters is the effect. Because once you've been shifted, you can't walk back into the old direction and pretend it fits anymore. You can't go back to sleep after being shaken awake. The road you thought was straight suddenly looks like a dead end. And the one you feared the most becomes the only one you can take. The unsettling truth is that you don't get to choose when this person arrives. You don't get to prepare for it. They arrive in the middle of your chaos, in the middle of your routines, in the middle of your carefully constructed plans. And with just their presence, they bend everything. That's why they feel like disruption. Because you were convinced you had control, and suddenly you don't. People often mistake this shift as coincidence, as chance. But it isn't. Deep down, you sense it was timed. You sense they were meant to show up exactly when they did, because if they had come too early, you wouldn't have been ready, and if they came too late, you would have been too far gone. The timing is never yours, and that's why it feels so unnerving. It feels orchestrated, almost designed, like something or someone wanted you redirected, and they were the tool chosen to do it. And it's not always gentle. The right person can hurt you as much as they heal you. They can drag you through pain, confusion, loss. They can break you down to the foundation, stripping away the lies you wrapped yourself in. But even that destruction is part of the shift. Because to move in a new direction, you often have to lose everything that chained you to the old one. Years later, when you look back, you'll trace the line of your story and you'll see the bend, the curve, the moment where everything tilted. And at that bend will be a person. Not always the person you expected, not always the person you wanted, but the one you needed. The one who changed your direction without asking for permission, without giving you warning, without letting you stay the same. They didn't just pass through your life. They rerouted it. You won't see them coming until it's too late. That's the twisted beauty of it. If you knew ahead of time, you'd try to prepare, you'd build defenses. You'd tighten your grip on the little world you've pieced together. But life doesn't give you that luxury. It doesn't knock on the door and politely announce, "Here comes the person who will change everything." No. It slips them into your story without warning, without explanation, like a knife in the dark. By the time you notice, they've already cut something open inside you. Think about it. If you saw them coming, you'd resist harder. You'd find ways to avoid them, to outsmart fate. But that's why it doesn't work that way. They show up when you're distracted, when you're busy playing out the same routines. When you've convinced yourself nothing will ever really shift. They walk in as if they're just another ordinary piece of the day, and you have no idea what's about to unfold. That's the trap. They blend in with the noise, but their effect hits like a gunshot. At first, they don't look like destiny. They look like coincidence. A chance meeting, a harmless conversation, a stranger's voice in the crowd. But the smallest detail, one word, one look, one presence, starts to gnaw at you. It lingers when everything else fades. You catch yourself replaying their words, remembering the way they stood, the way they saw you. That's how it begins. Quiet, subtle, almost innocent. And then, before you realize it, you're altered. They've shifted your thoughts, cracked your patterns, forced you into a confrontation with yourself you weren't ready for. And you can't undo it. Once the door is open, it doesn't close again. You can try to go back to your routines, but they no longer fit. You can try to erase them, but the imprint stays. That's what too late means. By the time you see their effect, it's irreversible. People love to believe they're in control, that nothing can touch them unless they allow it. But this isn't about control. This is about inevitability. The right person doesn't wait for your permission to change you. They arrive, they collide, and the impact leaves a mark you can't scrub out. That's why it feels so violent, even when it's wrapped in something as gentle as a smile. Because the violence isn't always physical. It's the tearing apart of who you thought you were. Sometimes the shift they bring is painful. Sometimes it feels like loss, like betrayal, like chaos ripping through the order you worked so hard to build. You want to hate them for it, blame them, curse the day they entered your world. But deep down, even through the pain, you know it wasn't an accident. You know there was a reason they showed up when they did, that the timing was too sharp to be random. You know you weren't meant to avoid this. You were meant to be broken open. Other times, the shift feels intoxicating. They make you see possibilities you never imagined. They awaken a hunger you didn't know you had. They turn the mundane into something unbearable, forcing you to chase something bigger, something deeper. And even in the rush of it, you realize this isn't something you can walk away from. It's already inside you. It's already too late. That's the thing about people like this. They don't need to stay forever to change you. They don't need to stick around, hold your hand, walk you through the transformation. Sometimes they enter, tilt your world, and vanish just as suddenly as they came. But the damage, or the gift, is permanent. The shift remains. Your path bends. Your story rewrites itself, with or without them in it. You won't see them coming until it's too late. And when you finally recognize who they were, you'll look back at the moment you first crossed paths and realize it wasn't random. It was the spark, the trigger, the collision that forced you to move. You'll see that by the time you noticed, the shift had already begun, and nothing could stop it. Disruption is the proof they were sent. People always think that when the right person comes into their life, it should feel soft, easy, like slipping into a dream where everything makes sense. But that's not how it works. The ones who matter most don't arrive to soothe you. They arrive to shake you, to disturb your balance, to rattle your cage, to pull apart the fragile illusion you've built around yourself. And it feels violent because it is. You mistake chaos for danger, but sometimes it's the only language that real transformation speaks. Think about it. Comfort has never forced anyone to change. It lulls you into sameness. It whispers lies that you're fine where you are. It convinces you that you don't need more. And you believe it until someone comes along who flips the table you've been eating off your whole life. That sudden disruption, that crash, that storm, they're not accidents. They're the evidence that this person isn't random. They were placed here, right here, to wake you up. The disruption they bring doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it's their presence alone that unsettles you. They see through you when others don't. They ask the question you've spent years avoiding. They laugh at the things you take so seriously. They strip away the masks you've been clinging to, and you feel exposed, almost humiliated. That's the proof. If they were meant to leave you the same, you wouldn't feel that sting. That discomfort, that unease, is the sign they've touched something real inside you. It doesn't always feel like a blessing. In fact, more often than not, it feels like an attack. You think, why them? Why now? Why couldn't I have stayed in my little bubble just a little longer? But bubbles aren't homes. They're prisons. And maybe the only way you'd ever step out is if someone came along and burst it without your permission. Disruption is cruel like that. It doesn't ask. It doesn't wait. It simply breaks, and once it's broken, you can't pretend you didn't see what was inside. The fascinating part is how you react. Some fight tooth and nail against it, trying to patch the walls, trying to tape the pieces of the bubble back together. Others deny it, pretend the disruption was meaningless, just a phase. But deep down, they know. Because once someone has rattled your soul, you can't unhear the sound of that shaking. You can ignore it, but it never goes away. It stays with you, a reminder that you were meant for more, that you were meant to move. And sometimes, the disruption looks like destruction. Maybe they force you to face a truth you've buried. Maybe they walk away and leave you hollow. Maybe they betray you in a way that cuts so deep you think you'll never recover. And yet, years later, when you piece together the story, you see it. The betrayal was the disruption you needed. The loss was the shift. The pain was the evidence that they weren't random. They were the tool life chose to break you open. Other times, disruption is disguised as love. They walk in, and suddenly nothing tastes the same. Nothing feels the same. Nothing matters the way it did yesterday. You're consumed, addicted, alive in a way that terrifies you. And you know this isn't ordinary. Because ordinary never shakes you like this. Ordinary doesn't make you restless in your own skin. Ordinary doesn't flip your entire world upside down with just a glance. That's the difference. Ordinary people keep you comfortable. Sent ones don't. You can measure their impact by the size of the mess they leave behind. The confusion, the questions, the sleepless nights, the way you can't go back to who you were before they appeared. That mess is the proof. Because if they were meaningless, you'd forget them easily. You'd move on without a scar. But scars are evidence. And the deeper the scar, the louder the message. This person was sent for a reason. Disruption is the proof they were sent. Not their kindness, not their smiles, not their promises. The disruption, the chaos, the way your world suddenly tilts off its axis. That's how you know you didn't meet them by accident. You were meant to be shaken. You were meant to be undone. And that's exactly why they came. Comfort dies so transformation can live. That's the rule nobody wants to face. People cling to their comfort like it's salvation, as if staying safe, predictable, and untouched will somehow give them meaning. But comfort is a coffin dressed up as a blanket. It keeps you warm, but it also keeps you buried. Nothing grows there. Nothing changes there. Nothing awakens there. And when someone enters your life to shift everything, the first thing they do is suffocate that comfort. They pull it right out of your hands, and you panic. because it feels like you're being robbed. But you're not being robbed. You're being revived. Transformation never arrives politely. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. Doesn't ask if you're willing to give up the soft lies you've been living in. It barges in, rips the mask from your face, and leaves you gasping in the cold. And in that moment, it feels like death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the little patterns that made you feel safe. The death of the identity you built to protect yourself from the truth. But only when that death happens can anything new come alive. You see, people want transformation without sacrifice. They want to evolve, but still cling to the old life that numbed them. They want to change, but without letting anything be destroyed. But destruction is the doorway. That's why the right person in your life often feels like chaos. They're not here to make you comfortable. They're here to drag you out of the grave you've mistaken for home. They kill your comfort, and you hate them for it, until you realize that nothing else could have woken you up. Sometimes it happens in love. You meet someone who makes you feel things you can't control. Suddenly, your safe routines feel unbearable. The job you tolerated, the life you settled for, the excuses you whispered to yourself, they all burn in the light of what they awaken. And it's terrifying, because you can't crawl back into your comfort after tasting what's real. Other times, it happens through pain. They hurt you, betray you, leave you shattered. But even in that destruction, you feel something stirring. The pain cracks you open in ways comfort never could. Comfort is seductive. It tells you that survival is enough. It whispers that as long as nothing hurts, you're fine. But survival isn't life. Survival is waiting to die slowly. Transformation demands more. And that's why comfort has to die first. It's the sacrifice required for growth. It's the blood price you pay for the chance to become something different, and the person who enters your life to shift everything. They are often the executioner. They kill your comfort without hesitation, and you resent them because you think they're taking from you. But they're not taking. They're clearing space. It's brutal, though, because the death of comfort leaves you naked, exposed. You no longer have the illusions to protect you. You no longer have the lies to hide behind. You feel raw, vulnerable, desperate to cling to anything that will numb the sting. But if you can endure that rawness, if you can resist the urge to run back into old patterns, that's when transformation begins to take root. The soil has been torn apart, the ground has been broken, and now something new can grow. The irony is that years later, when you look back, you'll see that the death of your comfort was the most important moment of your life. You'll see that without it, you would have stayed asleep forever. You'll see that the person who killed, it wasn't your enemy, but your catalyst. They didn't come to make you happy. They came to make you alive. Comfort dies so transformation can live. It's cruel. It's unfair. It feels like loss, but it's the only way. And when someone enters your life who rips comfort from your hands, that's not punishment. That's the first breath of something real. Funny thing about money, it's never really about the numbers, is it? It's about the weight it carries, the chains it locks around your chest, the way it decides whether you breathe easy or choke on the next bill. And just when you think you've been abandoned to scrape and claw forever, that's when the unexpected creeps in. A shift, a turn, a ripple in the fabric you thought was sealed tight. Not because you begged loud enough, not because you played the game perfectly, but because sometimes the script changes without warning. And suddenly, what once felt like drought tastes a little like rain. Money shifts when you least expect it. You sit there, staring at the numbers, convinced they've carved themselves into stone, mocking you with their stubborn refusal to grow. You calculate, you predict, you plan, and yet nothing seems to move. The more you stare, the heavier it feels, like chains tightening with every tick of the clock. And then, when you've given up hope, when you're not even looking, that's when it happens. The shift. A change so subtle, at first you almost miss it, but powerful enough to flip the weight you've been carrying for far too long. It doesn't come dressed in logic. It rarely arrives through the neat little formulas you've been taught. You expect money to move when you force it, when you grind yourself down, when you stretch yourself thin. But money doesn't obey your desperation. It obeys timing, flow, alignment. And just when you've convinced yourself you're stuck in a permanent drought, a door you never saw creaks open. An opportunity falls into your lap. A mistake turns into a miracle. What you thought was a dead end suddenly becomes the very path forward. The beauty and the madness of it is that you never see it coming. If you could predict it, you'd ruin it. You'd cling too tightly, chase too frantically, suffocate it before it had a chance to breathe. That's why the shift hides until the moment you've stopped clawing for control. It waits until you've collapsed into surrender, until you've accepted that nothing is moving, until you've stared so long into the emptiness that you almost believe it's permanent. And that's when the current turns. That's when the numbers flicker. That's when the drought breaks. Money has a way of mocking your control. You think you can manage it perfectly, but it always slips, always reminds you that you're not the master of the flow. You can chase, but the shift only comes when it decides to. And that unpredictability, that's the secret. Because it teaches you that wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about surprise, disruption, timing. It teaches you that money can enter your life in ways you never imagined, through channels you never prepared for. It humbles you, because it proves you're not the one pulling the strings. Think of the times you were down to nothing, ready to break. You didn't have a plan. You didn't have an answer. And then, out of nowhere, a check arrived. A debt was forgiven. An idea took root that turned into income. You didn't orchestrate it. You couldn't have predicted it. Yet there it was, shifting the entire atmosphere around you. One moment of change, one unexpected turn, one flicker in the system, and suddenly you breathed again. And here's the strange part. The shift never feels like what you thought it would. It's not the grand payday you fantasized about. It's not the perfect scheme you had in your head. It's something different, smaller, stranger. And yet it moves everything. Because the power of the shift isn't in the size, it's in the timing. It's in the way it shows up when you're convinced you've been forgotten. It's in the way it pulls you from the edge just before you fall. That's why you can't measure life by the numbers alone. Numbers lie. They trap you in fear, convince you nothing will change. But money shifts when you least expect it. It doesn't play by your rules. It bends reality in ways you can't see coming. And while you're there, staring at the screen, sighing at the totals, sinking under the pressure, a shift is already forming somewhere you can't see. It's moving toward you quietly, slowly, deliberately. Waiting for the moment you'll be shocked enough to believe again. Scarcity teaches you what abundance can't. When you have less than you need, when every coin feels like a decision between survival and collapse, you start to see the world differently. Scarcity strips away the illusions abundance wraps you in. It forces you to stare at the raw bones of life, to question what really matters, to see value in the smallest things that most people overlook. You don't waste. You don't take for granted. You learn the weight of what others carelessly throw away. People think abundance makes you wise, but it doesn't. Abundance makes you numb. It blinds you, convinces you that resources are endless, that comfort is guaranteed. You forget hunger, you forget struggle. You forget how fragile the ground beneath you really is. Scarcity reminds you. Scarcity sharpens you. It teaches you discipline when abundance would have made you careless. It teaches you gratitude when abundance would have made you greedy. It teaches you endurance when abundance would have made you weak. When you're in scarcity, every choice is magnified. Every dollar is stretched. Every opportunity is weighed. Every mistake carries consequences. It hurts, yes, but it also builds. You begin to see creativity where others see walls. You discover solutions where others give up. You learn how to create something out of nothing. And that ability, born in scarcity, is worth more than money itself. Because when abundance finally comes, you won't waste it. You won't lose it. You won't let it slip through your fingers the way others do. You'll know what it costs to have nothing, and you'll never forget it. Scarcity also reveals people. When you're at your lowest, you see who disappears and who stays. You see who values you when you have nothing to offer, and who only valued what you could give. Abundance hides that. When you have more than enough, people gather, smile, play nice. Scarcity strips the mask away. You learn the truth about loyalty, love, and trust. It's painful, but it's real. And once you know, you can't unknow it. The strange thing is, scarcity teaches you to dream differently. Not just about wealth, but about life itself. When you're empty, you begin to imagine fullness in vivid detail. You don't take the picture of abundance for granted. You crave it, design it, shape it in your head until it becomes almost tangible. And that hunger, that's the fuel. Abundance never fuels you. It soothes you, lulls you, makes you lazy. Scarcity keeps you alive, sharp, desperate enough to move, to build, to fight. Of course, no one wants to be there. No one wants to live in scarcity, to feel the bite of hunger, the fear of bills, the shame of lack. But when you've walked through it, when you've survived it, it plants something inside you that abundance alone never could. It gives you a foundation. It gives you perspective. It gives you resilience. And one day, when the shift comes and the numbers finally tilt in your favor, you'll carry those lessons into abundance. You'll use them to protect yourself, to grow wisely, to never let yourself become blind again. Scarcity teaches you things abundance can't, because it strips away the easy lies. It shows you what matters. It shows you who matters. It shows you what you're capable of when the world thinks you're empty. And the irony is, when abundance finally arrives, it won't even be abundance that defines you. It'll be the lessons you carried from scarcity, the scars that taught you how to survive, the hunger that turned into fire. That's the real wealth. That's the real treasure. That's what you never lose, even when the numbers fall again. Breakthrough often hides behind struggle. Everyone wants the light without the tunnel, the victory without the bruises, the prize without the fight. But the truth is, struggle is the disguise that hides your turning point. It's the camouflage that keeps the reward just out of reach, waiting to see if you'll push through the pain long enough to deserve it. Breakthrough isn't denied to you. It's concealed, buried under layers of exhaustion, fear, and disappointment, daring you to dig deep enough to find it. Struggle is the test. It's the wall that stands between who you are and who you claim you want to be. Most people see the wall and turn back. They complain, they curse their luck, they talk about how unfair life is. But that wall isn't punishment. It's protection. It's making sure that only those willing to bleed for their dream will touch it. If the door was wide open, everyone would walk through. The wall keeps it sacred, keeps it valuable, keeps it from being wasted on the ones who would throw it away the moment it gets hard. And here's the cruel joke. The closer you are to the breakthrough, the heavier the struggle feels. It's like the universe piles it on, adding weight after weight, until you're convinced you can't go another step. That's the final test. That's the moment most people quit. But if they only knew, if they only realized that the weight pressing on them was proof they were inches away, they would keep going. The heaviness is the signal. Struggle doesn't mean it's over. It means you're nearly there. Struggle shapes you in ways ease never could. Ease makes you soft. Ease makes you careless. But struggle chisels you, sharpens you, makes you into something unrecognizable from who you were before. You think it's breaking you, but it's building you. Every tear, every scar, every sleepless night is carving you into someone who can handle the weight of the breakthrough when it finally arrives. Without the struggle, you wouldn't even be ready. You'd collapse under the very thing you thought you wanted. Think about the stories people tell when they make it. They don't talk about the moment the breakthrough arrived, as much as they talk about the struggle it took to get there. They remember the nights they almost gave up, the times they were rejected, the days they felt abandoned. Why? Because those moments were the fire. That was where their strength was forged. The breakthrough is just the reward, but the struggle is the proof. The proof that they became strong enough to hold it. And maybe that's why it has to hurt so much. Because the pain strips away the ones who aren't serious. The dreamers who like to talk but not bleed. The ones who want shortcuts. The ones who want comfort. They're gone by the time the breakthrough reveals itself. Only the ones who crawl through the mud, who scream into the darkness, and keep moving anyway, get to see what's on the other side. The struggle filters out the weak. It's easy to think you've been abandoned when life gets unbearable. Easy to believe the struggle means you're cursed, forgotten, doomed to fail. But what if it means the opposite? What if it means you've been chosen to hold something heavy, something rare, something not everyone gets to touch? What if the struggle is not proof of your weakness, but evidence of your destiny? Breakthrough often hides behind struggle because struggle is the doorway. It's the last barrier, the final gauntlet. You can't skip it. You can't bargain your way around it. You have to walk through it, bruised and bleeding, with nothing but the will to not collapse. And once you do, once you push past the weight and refuse to quit, that's when the disguise falls away. That's when the struggle reveals what it was hiding all along. The life you've been reaching for. Waiting on the other side of your pain. A single change can rewrite your stability. It doesn't take 100 moves, a lifetime of planning, or endless years of grinding. Sometimes it's one shift, one decision, one unexpected turn that flips everything you thought was permanent. People live as if their circumstances are carved in stone, as if the misery they're drowning in today will follow them forever. But life isn't stone. It's glass. It can shatter. It can crack. It can be reshaped by the smallest blow at the right time. That change can arrive in silence. A new connection. A phone call you weren't expecting. An idea that sneaks into your head when you can't sleep. A risk you finally decide to take. You don't see it coming. You don't dress up for it. You stumble into it by accident. And suddenly, the story bends. The ground that was shaking under your feet steadies. The weight that crushed your chest loosens. All because of one shift. The mind resists this idea because it wants predictability. It wants to believe that stability can only come from years of stacking bricks, one on top of another, until you've built some fortress. But life doesn't work that neatly. Sometimes the fortress never comes. Sometimes you're left exposed, vulnerable, and then, out of nowhere, a door opens that changes everything. The stability you thought would never arrive rushes in through one unexpected crack. And the irony, most people miss it. They're so obsessed with the big picture that they overlook the small pivot that carries the power to rewrite it all. They complain about how unfair life is, not realizing life already placed the key in their path. But it doesn't look like a key. It looks like inconvenience. It looks like failure. It looks like a risk too dangerous to touch. That's how the single change hides. It disguises itself as something you'd rather avoid. The weight of stability doesn't always come from money, either. Sometimes it's perspective. Sometimes it's confidence. Sometimes it's the realization that you don't have to live the way you've been living anymore. That kind of change, once it clicks in your head, makes everything else fall in line. The same problems remain, but you see them differently. You stop panicking. You stop running. And in that shift, your entire world steadies itself. One change can also expose how fragile your old stability was. The job you thought was secure disappears with one signature. The relationship you thought was forever collapses in one conversation. Stability isn't about clinging to what you have. It's about being ready to adapt when the change arrives. The people who survive aren't the ones who build the tallest walls. They're the ones who bend when the storm comes. And here's the dark humor of it all. Sometimes the very collapse you're terrified of is the change that brings real stability. Losing the job forces you into the work you were meant to do. Being abandoned pushes you to build strength no one can take away. Hitting the bottom teaches you how to stand without depending on anyone else. The crack in the glass feels like destruction, but it's really transformation. A single change is enough to rewrite your stability because life isn't fair, predictable, or controlled. It's chaotic. It's wild. It bends when it wants, not when you demand it. But hidden in that chaos is opportunity, waiting for you to stop clinging so tightly to the way things are. And once you accept that, once you open your eyes to the possibility that everything can turn in a moment, you start to see change not as an enemy, but as the very force that steadies you. One shift, one turn, one decision. Sometimes that's all it takes for your entire foundation to be rebuilt beneath your feet. Fear of lack is the real prison, not numbers. You stare at your account, at the balance that looks like a cruel joke, and you convince yourself that those digits are the chains holding you down. But it's not the numbers that cage you. It's the fear they create. Fear of not having enough. Fear of losing what little you do have. Fear that tomorrow will be worse than today. That fear builds walls higher than any debt, thicker than any bill, stronger than any poverty. The prison isn't financial. It's psychological. Numbers shift. They rise, they fall. They fluctuate with chaos you can't control. But fear roots itself in your chest, strangles every thought, poisons every decision. It makes you hesitate when you should act. It makes you cling when you should release. It makes you so obsessed with survival that you forget how to live. You start building your choices around what you might lose instead of what you could gain. And that's how the prison tightens, not with locks and chains, but with invisible bars made of worry. Fear of lack turns people into beggars, even when they're not broke. It convinces them they'll never have enough, no matter how much they hold in their hands. That's why millionaires still panic at the thought of losing it all. That's why people with plenty hoard and clutch, never satisfied. The fear whispers in their ear, "What if it disappears tomorrow?" That whisper is louder than the truth, louder than logic, louder than any number in the bank. Because once you let fear run the show, no amount will ever feel safe. This prison is powerful because it's invisible. You think you're making smart decisions, cautious decisions, responsible decisions. But really, you're moving from fear, not wisdom. You're cutting off opportunities before they grow, because you're scared to risk. You're sabotaging connections, because you're terrified of being used. You're choking yourself before the world even gets the chance to. That's the cruel trick. Fear makes you your own executioner. And the irony, the fear of lack often creates the very lack you're terrified of. When you act small, when you think small, when you cling too tightly, you shrink your world until there's no room for growth. You lock yourself into the very scarcity you wanted to escape. The prison feeds itself. The more afraid you are, the tighter the bars close in. The more you panic, the less you see opportunities. The more you hoard, the faster things slip through your fingers. Numbers can't define you. They can't dictate your future. They're temporary, fragile, meaningless without context. What defines you is how you move when the numbers look ugly, when the account is low, when the bills stack up higher than your courage. If fear runs you, you collapse. If faith runs you, you push forward. The difference isn't in the balance, it's in the mindset. The numbers might scream you're losing, but if you don't let fear turn that into a prison, you're still free. Fear of lack is the greatest thief because it steals the present. It drags you into imaginary tomorrows filled with disasters that haven't happened yet. You sit there, paralyzed, mourning money you haven't lost, panicking over problems that may never exist. And while you're trapped in that nightmare, life is happening without you. Opportunities pass, moments vanish, relationships wither. All because you let fear cage you in a future that doesn't even exist. The truth is, freedom isn't about having unlimited wealth. Freedom is about not being ruled by the fear of losing. That's why some people with little live bigger than people with much. That's why some souls shine, even when they're broke. They're not chained by fear. They know that life shifts. Money comes and goes, and no number can imprison them unless they hand over the key. Fear of lack is the real prison, not numbers, because numbers don't hold power over you until you let them crawl into your head and convince you they do.